requirements management, especially as it relates to managing requirements in a document-based system. We'll talk about that, and then we'll go into the sort of problem solution where we'll talk about the pains, and then we'll talk about each of the 5 easiest solutions for those common pains. And again, these are going to be mostly tailored at first towards working within your current document or your current requirements management system, and then a little bit more about how Polarion can really help out with those even more so. The 5 pains, and really the 5 solutions here that we're going to be talking about today are creating and enforcing granularity, parametricizing properties and workflow, reusing already established requirements, specifications, and requirements, automatically capturing history, and establishing traceable documents. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the Polarion RM product and the Polarion ALM product as a whole. And at the end, any last question and answers. So the first of our common requirements pains, all these are sort of in the form that I have a requirement specification. It's written up, but what exactly are my requirements? As you can see from the screenshot below, this is a requirement specification that we use in our demonstrations. So it's a little bit light, but I think it will get a lot of these points across. But you notice these are all written in paragraphs, and this is something that we see a lot when we go on customer sites. Our customers are writing requirements as they think them. And this is especially true for customers who don't really have any regulatory oversight quite yet, either because of their industry doesn't require it or they just haven't got to that level yet. But everything's as you would think about things. For example, this first one, users must be able to create patron or students accounts by readiness align, suitable registration page or pages should be provided, and so forth. It's one paragraph, but it really encompasses a lot of ideas. And that's really what the second bullet point is about. Paragraphs may contain multiple requirements. And how do you know where the first one ends and the first one starts? Is users being able to create an account a single requirement, or that part of the whole registration page should be available? In addition, a lot of times our requirement specifications that we see are broken up into many different sections. You'll have an introduction section, you'll have an appendix at the end, but then you'll have what we sort of call the bulk requirements section in the middle. However, are requirements only contained in that section? Maybe they're contained outside that section in the appendix with a list of values that the product must meet, or might be contained in the introduction, where it says that the overall goal of a product or a project should be X, Y, Z. So how do we know that these are requirements too, and not just the things that are contained within the section? And lastly, what kind of requirement are these? Oftentimes, requirement specifications are broken up into system requirement specifications, design specifications, and so forth, but that's not necessarily the case all the time. In this example, users being able to create an account is really a system-level requirement, or a very high-level requirement, whereas a suitable registration page which should be provided is a little bit lower level. This is something that really supports that first requirement. So how do I really know where my requirements begin and start, what's related to another, and where they're really contained? So the solution to this is really creating and enforcing granularity in your requirements. And this is really taking the requirements and turning them into individual entities, not just really portions of the documents. So if you notice here, not only have we broken up our requirements, so now requirements are specifically one line, and there's another line, and so forth. But we've also gone ahead and actually assigned unique IDs to them. This is going to be helpful not only in identifying the requirements, but later on when we do want to trace these requirements to other artifacts like test cases or lower level requirements. In addition, it really tells us where a requirement begins and starts. You'll notice that in this first one, EL1 or 001, this is really 2 of those sentences put together. So this is for us one real requirement. Again, for another team, maybe this is broken up into 2 requirements, or a requirement and a sub-requirement. However, there's still a few issues with doing this sort of manually and in the Microsoft Word system. The first one is that assigning these unique IDs can be very, very tedious. Making sure that every single ID is unique, there's nothing else that duplicates that ID, as well as having some sort of structure to the system. You know, a lot of times we'll see our customers number things where section 1 is the 100 section, and they'll start numbering from there, so that if they do have to put something in the middle, they have some room in between. Other times they'll have sort of an outside application that they go to and they say, I want to get an ID for this requirement. You know, please create me a unique ID. Go through the database and make sure that nothing's overriding one another. So what we can do in Polarion now, we sort of take this a step further. Let me go ahead and open our Polarion user interface. What we do in Polarion is that the requirements are broken up to what we call work items. And these are individual artifacts that can be traced around. And again, this is really what creates the granularity in our requirement specifications. For example, EL105 is a singular requirement, just as we broke them up in the Word document. However, when we do create a new requirement, for example, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one here, you'll see that when I go ahead and save this, it automatically assigns an ID. It goes through the database and finds all the numbers that are out there and assigns it a unique work item ID so that this work item can be uniquely identified throughout the entire system. And we'll see, no matter where we move this ID will stay the same. And again, because these are granular items, I can go ahead and open this up. You'll see it's again, not really contained in that document. So now I know exactly what this requirement is. I can change only this requirement, nothing else. And I really have full granularity to my requirement specification, something that I can't really do solely in Microsoft Word. If we go back to our PowerPoint slides here, even with our our Microsoft Word document broken up, it's still just part of a larger document. And we'll talk about in our next sort of problem statement, being able to assign you specific properties to only one requirement, not really to the entire document. So you see, we've gone ahead and added IDs, but it's not really the full solution to our problem now. So the next common pain, I have my requirement specification, but what does my requirement mean? How long until it's finished? And what this is really sort of getting at is that within the requirements document, you notice here, we have certain words that have meaning or are supposed to have meaning. Things like must, should, shall, will, and things of that nature. But what does this actually mean? You know, what sort of priority is this? Where's the hierarchy of these words? Does this really have some sort of meaning outside of just making it easy for the user to understand? And same thing with properties. A lot of times, the requirements properties will be in tables. Things as such, for example, one of our automotive customers thinks that a door must have a specific size and specific specification. These will be stored in tables, but it's not really searchable or sortable. Yeah, even within a Word document, you can use the find option, but you can't really search or sort any of the properties for your requirements. And finally, how do you really know what state the requirements are in? We see a lot of our customers and a lot of our prospects come to us and say that they really want document-based approval system because that's what they're used to. They have these large bulk documents and they want to be able to approve them all at once. But then a lot of our customers also come back and say, well, we don't really want to have to approve our entire documents at once. What if parts of our document are ready to go and what if parts need more review? We don't want to sort of stay with the entire document having a status when we can have each individual requirement have a status. That's sort of what this is coming to, is that each requirement has different information or a different life cycle, and they need to be tracked separately from out of the document. Really, what this comes down to is eliminating, first of all, natural language descriptors. And this is not necessarily meaning not using terms that are easy to understand, but this is really defining specific values for specific fields. For example, the field severity should only have X number of values. Must have, should have, will have, or maybe not even will have, nice to have, will not have. And it just eliminates some of the confusion that comes from having what we almost call bad words. And we do have an extension that sort of picks this out where they look for words that are ambiguous, things like, well, bad, will, and words like that don't really have strict meaning. But having a sort of a severity enumeration where you can come in and say, this is a must-have, so this is level 1 out of 4. This is a should-have, this is level 2 out of 4. It becomes very, very useful. But these fields should also be organized in a way that's very easy to understand. Having them in tables at the bottom of the requirements or having them in some organized format just makes them easy for a user to come in here and look and know exactly what the information is instead of having to go through and pick words out of the requirement. Some prospect customers that we've seen had taken this even a bit further. They had taken all their requirements and put them into Excel worksheets so that they can much more easily sort through them, filter them, and so forth. And that's what this last one said. Requirements really should be kept in a repository for easy searching and sorting. But you'll see even with an Excel document, there's still it's not quite right. Even though you do have your searching, you have your sorting, you can't really move them around. You can't really see all the information as easily as you could with sort of a system like Polaris, and we'll get into that in just a second. So one question that has come in, relating to having the state of a requirement set, are there also thoughts on electronic signature per requirement? This is a great question, and this really comes back to that whole idea of granularity. And definitely, yes, there are ways you can have electronic signatures for each requirement, for each approval status, or approvals for those requirements. And I'll show that in just a second here. But let's come back to our document. And one thing you'll notice is that within each of these requirements, we have two values over here on the right. For example, this one is must have and change implementation. For someone who's just new to the system, it might not be exactly clear what they are, but I'm going to go ahead and open up our work items property panel over here on the right. And what these are the status, the severity and the status of the work item. And for this, not only is it easy to see it's there, but it has specific values here that have been set by our template. And again, it sort of removes any sort of ambiguity on what must have means. In this case, we know that must-have is the most important requirements. Should have are the next ones, and so forth. And same thing with status. Polarian has a full workflow engine built in where you can define workflows and define specific transitions for workflows and do things, as was just asked, with electronic signatures. For example, if I go ahead and open EL 105 here, we can go ahead and change the status from change implementation to accept, and I'll actually go ahead and add an approval down at the bottom here. One nice thing about having granular work items is the ability to apply approvals directly to individual work items as opposed to entire documents. And if you go ahead and save, you'll see that it does require us to have electronic signatures for specific work items, specific requirements, and not just for the whole document as a whole. And again, this really comes down to being able to work more agilely, being able to approve requirements before the rest of the document is completed, and just get to work on them in general. Most importantly is the fact that now this requirement, EL 105 with login phase, has very specific sets of properties and information. And again, these fields are fully customizable within Polarian. You can have them sort of contained in whatever way they want. And Polarian will be able to have the ability to enforce the existence of specific properties as well, something that's not quite available in some of the Microsoft offerings, which, to be fair, are not really true requirements management solutions. But things like requiring there to be a severity, requiring there to be a resolution for certain workflows. These are something that even with the sortable Excel tables, you don't really get from an Excel-based requirements management solution. All right, yeah, so just going on, as you can see, we have our tables here, but still, we don't have all the traits, the sorting and the enforcement that we might get from a requirements management tool. So going on, another pain that we often see, and especially for our customers who have regulatory oversight, DoD customers, medical, and automotive, is the requirement that they need to be able to create similar specifications for other projects. This reuse of specifications is very, very specific on what they need to reuse and what they can't be used. Certain things can be reused with no extra approvals, but some of them have to go through the whole approval process again. And they often come to us and say, we don't want to go through the entire process of building a whole new requirement specification for each project when 45% can be reused, but we still need to do 55%. How do I do this without typing it all up again, making sure everything is in place and so forth? And this is not necessarily specific to our regulated customers either, but how do I create a variant specification that stays in sync with our main line of development? And this is something we see very often, is that our customers will have a main product. For example, we have a customer who builds mobility scooters, and they have a main line, something that they work on all the time and is really their core product. But every so often they do need to create variant specifications for a scooter with 4 wheels, scooter with 3 wheels, an off-road scooter, or things that are a little bit more robust. And they all tie into that same single main scooter, and everything has to be kept up to date with that product, but they need to have separate specifications for each one of those to hand off to their vendors and to hand off to their suppliers. And their biggest problem was, how do I keep these in sync? I don't want to have one person dedicated spending all their time to looking at for every single change in the main document and going through and making those changes in my 5 other specifications documents. And finally, if I do want to compare it or I want to merge it, how do I go about doing that? And lastly, the easiest way to reuse something is just to copy and paste. I can copy and paste a requirement from one of my documents, paste it into another document, and it's fine. But how do I know where in the approval process that requirement is? And again, in Word and in Excel, it's really a document-based system. It's a single artifact-based system where you approve the entire document or you don't approve it at all. So if I copy and paste a new requirement, there's no real individual controls on the life cycle of that requirement. It just goes through with the rest of the requirements. But if I don't want to do that, how can I really manage that? Again, the easiest way to do it is just by creating templates. I can easily take my Microsoft Word document, copy it somewhere else, change some information, and I have a reuse specification or a branch specification. However, if I have a requirement specification that's 100,000 or 1,000 requirements long, but I only want to keep 45% of those, it becomes a little bit trickier because not only do I have to copy it, but I have to go through line by line and make sure that only the requirements that I want are kept. And lastly, even in Microsoft Word, the hardest part, as we talked about, is just getting all those changes to either our original document or our new document and bringing them back into the other one. It's not really that possible with some of these document-based systems. So going back into our Polarian workspace, we have sort of what we can call reuse and branching. And reuse is very that traditional template-based specification system where I can take a specification that exists, just like in Microsoft Word, create a new one, save as. Now it's completely separate. However, it's a little bit more robust than, say, copy and paste in a Microsoft Word document, because now I can establish linkages back to those, which we'll actually talk about in another slide. But I can also do things before the entire reuse process that make my life really a lot easier when I do manage my new one. One thing that is very nice about using a tool like Plarium with its granularized work items is that I have the ability to not only filter a database of information, but I have the ability to filter documents as well. For example, if I'm creating a new specification and I only want to keep the requirements within my specification that are of a severity must-have, for example, you'll see there's quite a few of them here that are should-have, nice-to-have, and so forth. And we'll just go ahead and create a filter here. And we'll say severity should be must-have. I can go ahead and filter here. And now I can reuse just this filtered document. And suddenly, those 55% of work items that I don't need to have in my new specification aren't there anymore. If we go ahead and scroll down, I don't have any should-haves, I don't have any nice-to-haves, I don't have any will-not-haves. It is simply must-have requirements. I can go ahead and reuse this. I can start my new specification all over again, only starting from this subset of requirements. And again, this is something that is very hard to do with Microsoft Word or even Excel. Going through and sorting everything, having to delete all that, and reusing information. So having a repository-based system like Plarium is very useful in that regard. And secondly, something that is probably even nicer to have than that, something that our customers really like about Plarium, is the ability to do what we call branching. Branching is slightly different than doing a reuse, because what happens here, let's do this I can go ahead and branch a document, and I can create this variant, and I can go ahead and change things. But you'll notice at first, all this information, this is exactly the same information as we saw in the last one. And that's true of reuse as well. But the difference is that this EL105 really is that last requirement. If I go ahead and open up my previous document, you'll see if I go ahead and make a change here, let's go ahead and delete this section. I go ahead and save. I come back to here and I go ahead and refresh this view. You notice all that information is not there anymore. And this is our tool to help manage variant. This way, if your mainline development is still active, you're still doing work on it, there's no need to have a single person going through and trying to make sure that all the changes get reflected in every other variant specification that exists. It automatically happens without anybody touching it, although you do have the option to sort of pinning back to a historical version of that requirement. And again, if you're creating a variant based on a specific version of your mainline, and you don't want the mainline development until maybe a specific point, just go ahead and pin it back there. It's not going to move. It's not going to change. You can go ahead and go along on the work. And so that's really how we get this full cycle of being able to reuse requirements, not only copying them somewhere else and starting them all over, but being able to reference them, making sure that all the information is still staying the same, and then passing information back as well. So the spec side here, I have my requirement specification, but what has been done to my requirements? We've been doing a lot of work in our requirements, but how do I know what's been changed? For example, take this example down here. I have two versions of the same information. It's a little bit small and hard to see here, but there's a few things that have been changed. But what do I really know has been changed here? Is there any information that's been changed? Do I have to go by line and find out exactly what's been changed? And a lot of our customers, to sort of see these changes, do what's sort of a revision-based system, where they save revisions every so often of their document. Usually these are specific points in time where they need to prove to the auditors that they have coverage, or they have to go to the FDA and get approvals. And of course, there will be intermediate revisions as well. But even for them, knowing what's changed either between two revisions, the FDA comes and say, something's changed here, can you tell us exactly what it is, who made that change, and so forth, or even just what's changed since the last revision. Being able to say, go to your requirement and say, has anything changed? Is there anything I need to work on? Or especially if I'm a QA engineer, if I'm writing my tests and there's still development going on, how do I make my tests better to reflect those changes? And this is really one of the big keys that prevents more flexible product development, is the fact that for the most part, development needs to be finished. The requirements need to be finished before they go on to QA. Just because if they aren't, QA has no idea what's going on. They don't know what the changes are. And then, in addition to knowing the changes, how do I control what changes have been made, when changes can be made, and also how do I prove to my regulatory body that changes were and were not made, who made the changes, when they made the changes, and maybe even why they made the changes. Document revisions can track changes between revisions. You can definitely do a word diff between two revisions and know what's going on. But what you can't really do in Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office, you can't really create revisions retroactively. You can't go back in time and say, I want to see how it looked on this date, unless you actually saved a revision on that date. And in addition, since the last revision, track changes can track each change. Each change. You can see sort of through here, you can see the strike through, you can see the red adding new words. But after a while, track changes starts to get a little unwieldy. You have tons of comments, you have lots of red lines and underlines, and it becomes a lot harder to look into and to read and to understand until that point where you create a new revision and it all goes away. You have no idea what's happened. And in addition, track changes doesn't really show who made the changes. They don't know why they made the changes unless they made a comment, which is not necessarily enforced. They don't know who made the changes, exactly what time they made the changes. They do go in and find that information. It's not stored in a very easy way to see it. And again, it's a big document. All the changes are stored just in that document. There's no real granular information. To be quite honest, this is the number one reason why people come to Plarium, or people come to us looking for a requirement management tool. It's the ability to see all the changes to the requirements. For example, if I go ahead and open up EL 105 here, instead of having to deal with red lines, instead of having to deal with track changes, I simply come up here at the top right, go ahead and click on my clock icon, and I see every single change that has been ever made. I see who made the change, when the change was made, the specific revision that the change was committed to, and again, all the information, what's been removed, what's been added, whether there's been approvals, whether there's been e-signatures, and so forth. And again, this goes all the way back to the beginning of time for every single revision. Similarly, if I go to my document here, you notice I have the same clock icons at the top right, and actually this is, let's go to this document. Now I can go back and see every single revision of this document from the time it was created to now. I can go back, not only can I see those changes, I can go and select two and I can compare them. And now I can see every single change that's happened between now and sometime in the past. And again, this is relatively arbitrary. I don't have to have a specific revision set in the system to go back and do the difference. I can just pick any point in time that I want, choose those two, and diff those together. Similarly, if I just want to go back and I want to see a single point in time, it's just as simple as going ahead and clicking show. I can go in here, I can see exactly as the product looked, or the specification looked at that time. Plarium definitely supports creating baselines as well, which is something that's quite a bit harder to do if you're using a document-based requirements management system. Having to go through all of your requirements or all your specifications and creating copies for every single specification for that baseline can become very tedious. In Plarium, it's very simple. Just because everything is contained in a single repository, I can go ahead and go to my baselines and just go ahead and create a new baseline. Requirements webinar. Now I have a baseline, and this baseline doesn't just pertain to the requirements, but it can pertain to all the test cases, all the documents, and so forth. Everything within the project is now sort of baselined in one fell swoop. We have a couple questions that have come in. One of them, what is your opinion on generating specifications from a database where attributes organize which requirements hold for which members of the product family? My opinion is that this is great. Having your specifications from a database, I feel, is always sort of the best way to do it, because you can really, and you sort of hit the nail on the head here, you can really easily sort your requirements and pick out your requirements based on specific properties. For example, one of those properties could be product family. I could easily just go into my requirements and say, I'm building a new router. Pick me out all the requirements that exist for building a wireless device, building a networking device, and put them to a specification for me. And now that really has done about 75% of the work for you. You have a majority of your requirements in there. There might be a few requirements, a few specifications that still need to be added, or some that might not be relevant. But you've done a large portion of the work that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do without a database-based requirements management solutions. In Word, unless you have specific separate documents for each sort of set of requirements, it's very hard to go in and just pick and choose bulk pieces. But in the database, a database or a repository-based system makes that much easier. Another question, is moving, change place, and hierarchy also registered? Definitely. Anything that happens to the work item is registered. And you'll see with traceability as well, creating links and removing links. This is sort of our representation of relationships and hierarchy are registered in the changes. Again, that's something that becomes harder to do in the document-based system. You can definitely use the word track changes to see if you removed a reference or didn't. But it's not as fine and it's not as easy to use as sort of these repository-based system. One more question that's come in. What database do you need to use Plarium requirements? It's a little bit of a tricky question because you don't actually need any database to use Plarium requirements. All of the information, all of the utilities that are needed to run Plarium are included within the installer. But specifically, Plarium stores all this information in a Subversion repository for several reasons, and we can definitely get into this a little more if you want to reach out. But we do have a full SQL layer, so if you're worried about accessing any of the information within your database, your requirements repository with a tool that does use SQL queries, it's definitely possible with Plarium. And this is sort of our last pain, and I saved it for the end because this is really the one that comes to us the most. And I noticed that in our questionnaires before the event, several of you guys asked about touching on this. And this is really, how do I ensure that my requirements have full coverage? How do I know that all of my requirements that need to be refined or all my requirements that need to be verified have those refining requirements, or those verifying test cases, or those implementing tasks assigned and created? How do I know that I don't have any gaps in my coverage? Or even that, how do I know that all my business cases are being covered by requirements, that I don't have any gaps in my requirements coverage? And additionally, how do I know when the information that is relevant to my requirement has been finished? If I have some implementing tasks, if I just track them, and if I'm tracking my requirements in Microsoft Word, and I'm tracking all my tasks in a tool such as Jira or Bugzilla or any of these sort of issue tracking tools, unless you go through and set up the integration where it pings you or it emails you or something, I don't know. If I'm the owner of this requirement, I don't really know what my tasks are up to. I don't know if they're working. I don't know if they're done. I don't know if there's a problem with them. There's no real communication between the requirements that are Microsoft Word and your tasks and issues. And then lastly, a lot of times, and we'll see this sort of in the solutions, but a lot of times our customers will come to us and say, we have these requirements, and we link them. We have a reference in the requirement that says, this requirement is is validated by test case XXX. But what happens if you change that document? What happens if you change the IDs? What happens if you just go ahead and delete that entire test case? There's no real up-to-date notifications of when those linkages have been broken, when they have been moved. And if you say that this requirement is verified by test case XYZ in document testcases.xsl, and suddenly the Excel spreadsheet changes name, you're in trouble. If it changes locations in your file system, you have to go through and search and find it. Even having them in places and linking them together, as we'll see here, it doesn't really solve the problem. So go on some of the easy solutions first. The most important aspect to traceability is having granular requirements and granular test cases with unique IDs. Having some sort of unique way to uniquely identify every single artifact within your system is of the utmost importance. And that way, you can do something. If you're just using the document-based system, you could go ahead and say that eLibrary or requirement EL002 is verified by eLibrary.xls row 11, or you could have some other identifying ID within that it doesn't change. Row ID is probably a good example of a bad way to do it because row IDs will change if you add steps, if you add test cases. But even this, if I change my test case, if I merge my test case specifications into, say, from two different Excel spreadsheets into one Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't always, you might have problems finding it at the end. So even this sort of linking here where you sort of tag it with the information, even if you do have unique IDs, even if you have granular requirements, it's not always perfect. You might lose your information. It might get moved. Things that might get merged. So what we do in Polarian, we have what we call linking, and this gets back to that question about changing places in the hierarchy. A link in Polarian is a descriptor between two work items. Again, this just some relationship that connects the two, whether it's verified, relates, and so forth. And within Polarian, instead of having to go in here and say, in this document, this requirement or this test case is my validating test case, I can simply come in here, go ahead and click on a link icon. I can change my role, and this is really where the relationship between two work items is defined. I can go and say that this work item verifies, for example, EL105 here. And this right here, again, is something that is not very easy to do within Microsoft Word. It's easy to go ahead and say that you can go ahead and write down verifies some requirements ID, but being able to search and being able to query on that becomes very, very difficult. And creating trace matrices, again, is probably the most, one of the most common questions that we get from our prospects and our customers is, I don't want to go through and I don't want to create my matrices by hand anymore. Can I just do it automatically? And having this linking system, let's go ahead and save this document here. Having this linking system all in the database, or sort of all in the repository, lets me come to a wiki page or to a report such as this and see all of my traceability in one easy view. I can go ahead and filter requirements. So let's go ahead and say I want version 1.0. But no matter what I filter on, I see on the left all the requirements in my system, and in the middle, all the test cases that are traced back to those requirements. And then finally, on the far right are all the defects that have been created by those test cases. And again, this can be done with any sort of work item types. Whether you're going from use cases to user stories to test cases, or whether it's from requirements to implementing tasks to blocking defects. Polarian is very customizable in this regard, but it does provide a very easy way to come in here and see exactly what's missing. Where are my gaps? If I do want to go ahead and fill them in, it's easy as just going ahead and clicking on the work item ID. And again, this is something that doesn't, even in a trace matrix that you've created within Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, this is something that will not necessarily happen. I'm sure you can create hyperlinks that point to a specific file system location, but then you still have to go find the requirement, and if that document moves, then you have to go ahead and fix your links. In Polarian, no matter where this requirement exists, whether it's in the document, out of the document, whether the document gets moved or whatever, I can just simply click on the hyperlink within my trace matrix and go ahead and open it elsewhere. And if I do decide I want to go ahead and fill in this gap, so go ahead and create a test case here. So I've gone ahead and created a test case. I don't have to go through and update my matrix by hand. I just go ahead and click refresh, and I go ahead and scroll down, EO 147, and now I have that gap filled in. So it becomes very, very easy to prove compliance, to show all your matrices. So just as a recap, our 5 sort of easiest solutions for requirements management and how Polarian can make them easier even, creating and enforcing granularity, making requirements into individual artifacts with unique IDs, just for traceability purposes, and being able to break down, provide specific information to the user. Parametricizing properties and workflows, defining actual properties and life cycles for those requirements instead of just sort of natural language wording. Reusing established requirements, not only copying and pasting from existing documents, but being able to query a database for your requirements and pull out only those ones that apply to your new product, being able to reuse those. Automatically capturing history, being able to see your history in a little bit of an easier way than just simply word track changes. And then finally, establishing traceable documents and establishing trace matrices without actually having to go through and update everything by hand. Just a little bit about the Polarian platform. Millions of people are using Polarian solutions worldwide. Polarian requirements is really just one portion of our overall solution. Polarian requirements, Polarian QA, and Polarian LLM all work together, and in fact they are the same product, to really provide you a full end-to-end ALM solution, not only with requirements, but then taking those requirements and passing them on to QA, or passing them on to development, and then finally on to quality assurance. We do strive to provide a solution for all products and services. We have customers across a large number of industries, especially in some of the more heavily regulated industries such as aerospace, automotive, medical. But we do really try to work on tailoring our product to our customers. And Polarian's flexibility is well known throughout the industry for being able to take our product, adapt it to any methodology, any service, and any industry. And here's just a brief showing of some of our customers, and we really are driven by our customers. As I said, our biggest goal is just to make a tool that really fits into our customers' environment without them having to change. All right, and again, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope this webinar was useful to you. Please visit our website at Polarian.com. You will be able to download a free trial or test drive Polarian online. And please, if you have any other questions that you might have, please either ask them in the QA now, or feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. All right, so one question that we've gotten: how do I report on requirements specific to stakeholders, sort of for ease of use of confirming the requirements in groups? So instead of, sort of like as we were talking about, instead of approving our requirements in a single document, how do I sort of break that down and approve them in smaller groups that might be specific stakeholders? One of the nice things about, again, having a requirements-based or sort of a database-based solution, such as Polarian, is that within here I can assign specific assignees here. For example, I could go ahead and assign this to myself, and I could go ahead and assign it to another one of our SEs here. And this is something that can be done automatically based on any of the properties that happen here. For example, a requirement type of user requirement could be assigned to a specific group of stakeholders. And then based on this information, we could have them go ahead and approve the work items. And again, this can be done in bulk as well, so that a set of stakeholders can get together and approve, say, 20 requirements all at once that relate to them. But again, it really does get away from that whole the whole container of the document. Now I don't have to approve the entire document, but I can approve only specific requirements within there. One more question that's come out is the Polarian available as a cloud solution? Well, first of all, Polarian itself is a Web 2.0 application. There's no client-side download or client-side installation that you have, which makes it really easy on your IT team. Polarian is available as a cloud solution, something where we can set it up for you and sort of takes any of the administration away from you. But you're also able to host Polarian on an outside server or even host Polarian internally as well. So we do have several different methods of providing Polarian as a solution. All right, a couple more questions that I came into. If an individual requirement at various states of workflow or approval, or at various states of workflow, what does this mean for the specification? for most regulated industries, you need to comply with the set of requirements of the spec'ing bodies. What state is the spec in? And this is a great question because it does really touch on one of the biggest issues that regulated industries have. So it is true that Polarion really keeps track of states and workflows at the requirements level. So each requirement may be at a different state. However, that doesn't mean that an entire specification cannot be at the same state. I can definitely have all of my requirements within that document or in that specification at the same state, and I can make those transitions at the same time. So there's no real blocker in Polarion towards managing your documents similar as you would with a Microsoft Word document where I approve and I disapprove everything at the same state. And like you brought up, it's definitely important when it comes to a lot of regulated industries. They do want to see a specific specification document that has been approved, not individual pieces. But there's really no reason that you can't do that within Polarion. There's nothing that you really can't do in Microsoft Word that you can't do in Polarion in terms of the approvals process. You can definitely just go ahead and approve everything in one fell swoop. One other question that came in, who can I speak to arrange for a demonstration of the entire ALM solution for Polarion? If you go to our website, there are links there to request a demonstration. Otherwise, you can go ahead and actually ask one of our panelists now. Depending on where you're located, we'll get you in touch with the specific sales rep that will be able to arrange that for you. In addition, if you can't get a hold of one right now, please just go ahead and contact me after the webinar. I can definitely get you in touch with who you need to speak to. All right. Well, if there's no more questions coming in, I'm going to go ahead and just put this last slide back up. Please feel free to reach out to me after this webinar. I can definitely answer any more questions you have. I can get you in touch with one of our sales representatives so we can get a demo if you would like. But again, please visit our website, www.polarion.com, for just more information on our products. I will keep this event open until the bottom of the hour, just in case any last questions are still coming in. But thank you very much. Please have a good day.